Before we begin tonight, a small note. The family you're about to meet isn't drawn from a single surviving name in the historical record. Nobody knows the exact families who lived out these final hours. Instead, this is a family we've carefully reconstructed using real archaeological evidence. The homes, the bread ovens, the plaster casts of real victims, and the only surviving eyewitness account of that day, written by a young Roman named Pliny. Every detail of daily life you'll hear tonight is grounded in something real. Only the names are ours. Let's go back now to the last days of Pompeii. It's a warm morning in the city of Pompeii in the year 79. The sun is rising slowly over the Bay of Naples, and the streets are already beginning to stir. Let's imagine a family living in a modest home not far from the Forum, a baker named Marcus, his wife Aurelia, and their two children, a boy of 10 and a girl of 6. Like thousands of other families in this bustling Roman city, they have absolutely no idea that they are living through the final days of their entire world. Pompeii, at this point in history, is a thriving, prosperous city. Roughly 11,000 people call it home, and the streets are full of life merchants selling wine and olive oil, artists painting elaborate frescoes onto villa walls, and the constant murmur of a busy Roman marketplace. Marcus rises before dawn, as he always does, to begin preparing the day's bread. His small bakery sits along a narrow stone street with a large domed oven built from brick and stone mills nearby to grind the grain. The smell of fresh bread drifts out into the cool morning air, mixing with the salty breeze coming in from the bay. Aurelia begins her morning much the way any Roman mother would, tending to the household, preparing a simple breakfast, making sure the children are fed and dressed before the heat of the day sets in. Their home isn't grand, but it's comfortable, a small central courtyard open to the sky, a few modest rooms, walls painted in warm reds and ochres, the way so many Pompeian homes were decorated. It's an ordinary Tuesday, in an ordinary week, in a city that has stood peacefully for generations. Looming behind the city, quiet and green, sits Mount Vesuvius. To the people of Pompeii, it isn't a threat at all, it's simply part of the landscape, a fertile mountain covered in vineyards and forests. Nobody living in Pompeii has ever seen it erupt. There's no memory, no story passed down through the generations, warning them of what this mountain is truly capable of. As far as anyone in this city knows, Vesuvius is simply a mountain, not a monster waiting to wake. Still, there have been small warning signs, if anyone had known how to read them. In the days leading up to this moment, the ground has trembled slightly, more than once. But earthquakes are nothing unusual in this part of Italy. The city is still repairing damage from a much larger quake 17 years earlier, and small tremors have simply become part of everyday life here. Some of the town's wells have mysteriously run dry in recent days, the water disappearing without explanation. A few farmers mention strange things, restless animals, an odd stillness in the birds. But life goes on. Marcus bakes his bread. Aurelia manages her home. The children play in the street outside, exactly as they do every single day. Then, sometime around midday, everything changes. A tremendous roar splits the sky, loud enough to be heard clearly across the entire bay. Vesuvius has erupted. A massive column of ash and smoke shoots upward from the mountain's summit, climbing so high into the sky that witnesses later describe it as looking like an enormous stone pine tree, a wide, spreading crown of ash, sitting atop a long, rising trunk of smoke. Across the bay, in the town of Misenum, a young man named Pliny watches this same column rising in the distance, and it's his written account, the only surviving eyewitness record of this entire event, that lets us reconstruct what happens next, hour by hour, almost 2,000 years later. In Pompeii itself, the initial shock quickly turns to confusion, then fear. Fine grey ash begins drifting down from the sky, coating rooftops, streets, and the leaves of every tree. Marcus steps out from his bakery, flour still on his hands, staring upward with the rest of his neighbors at a sky that no longer looks like their sky at all. Aurelia gathers the children close. Within the hour, the ash has thickened into a steady fall of light volcanic pumice stone, small and rough, clattering onto rooftops like strange, endless hail. As the afternoon wears on, the pumice fall grows heavier and heavier. It begins piling up in the streets first, just a light dusting, then inches, then, by evening, well over a foot deep in places. Rooftops start groaning under the growing weight. some begin to crack and collapse entirely under the strain. The sky, once bright blue, has turned a deep, sickly gray-orange, the sun reduced to a dim, reddish glow, struggling to break through the ash cloud above. Families across Pompeii now face an agonizing decision. Do they stay, sheltering inside homes that might collapse under the weight of ash and stone? Or do they flee outside, into streets filled with falling pumice, choking dust, and a rapidly darkening sky? Some, like our baker Marcus and his family, choose to leave. They tie cushions and folded cloth over their heads for protection, just as we know other real residents of the bay did that same day, and step out into a street that no longer resembles the one they walked through only that morning. The journey toward the city gates is slow and difficult. Ash blankets everything. The air itself has grown thick and hard to breathe. Aurelia holds her daughter's hand tightly, while Marcus carries their son on his shoulders, stepping carefully over stones and rubble that have already begun to bury the street. All around them, other families are doing the exact same thing, a slow, desperate exodus of ordinary people trying to outrun a mountain. Across the bay, a Roman naval commander named Pliny the Elder, uncle to the young man whose letters would later preserve this whole story, makes a remarkable decision. Rather than fleeing the danger himself, he orders his fleet of warships to sail directly toward it, hoping to rescue as many terrified coastal residents as he possibly can. It's an act of genuine courage. Tragically, it will also cost him his life before the disaster is over. Through the long night that follows, the eruption continues without pause. Pumice keeps falling, buildings keep collapsing under its weight. Some families who chose to shelter indoors are trapped as roofs give way entirely. Outside, the roads have become almost impossible to travel, buried under stone and drifting ash, lit only by flashes of volcanic lightning crackling through the thick, churning cloud overhead. Then, in the very early hours of the second day, something changes. The relentless pumice fall begins to ease. For a brief, deceptive window of time, the air clears slightly. Some residents who had fled the city the day before, believing the worst is finally over, actually begin making their way back toward their homes, hoping to gather whatever belongings they might have left behind. It's a fatal mistake. This isn't the end of the eruption at all, it's simply the eye of the storm. Just before dawn, the volcano's eruption column, weakened and unable to hold its own weight any longer, suddenly collapses in on itself. What follows is the deadliest part of the entire disaster, a scorching wave of superheated gas, ash, and rock called a pyroclastic surge, racing down the mountainside at speeds exceeding 100 miles an hour, with temperatures well over 500 degrees. It reaches Pompeii in a matter of moments. For anyone still remaining inside the city at that point, death comes almost instantly. We don't know, of course, exactly what became of our baker Marcus and his family that morning, whether they made it safely beyond the city walls the night before, or whether, like so many real Pompeians, they never had the chance to escape at all. What we do know, from the actual archaeological record, is almost unbearably intimate. Nearly 2,000 years later, excavators discovered hollow spaces preserved in the hardened ash layer spaces left behind by bodies that had long since decayed away. By carefully pouring plaster into these voids, researchers were able to recreate the exact final positions of real Pompeian victims: a mother curled protectively around her child, a man shielding his face with his arm, a dog straining against its chain. These plaster casts remain some of the most haunting, deeply human artifacts from the ancient world, silent witnesses to the final moments of people who, just like our imagined family, woke up that morning expecting nothing more than an ordinary day. By the time the eruption finally ended, Pompeii and its neighboring town of Herculaneum lay buried under many feet of ash and volcanic debris, disappearing from the world almost entirely for the next 17 centuries. And in a strange, quiet twist of fate, that same volcanic ash which destroyed Pompeii in a matter of hours also perfectly preserved it. Bread still sitting in ovens, wall paintings still vividly colored, everyday objects frozen in the exact place someone had set them down, on what they believed, right up until the very last moment, would be just another ordinary day. If tonight's story carried you gently through the quiet streets of an ancient city, that's exactly where we wanted to leave you. Somewhere calm, somewhere far away, somewhere history has already settled into stillness. Let your thoughts rest now. There's nothing left to hold on to tonight. Just let it drift, slowly, into sleep.